The wind howled like a wounded beast across the open plains of the Arizona frontier. The year was 1878, and the sun had long since vanished behind a wall of black clouds. Daniel McGraw, a quiet cowboy known for his honesty and hard hands, rode through the wilderness with nothing but his horse, Dusty, and a pack of supplies. He had spent the day rounding up stray cattle from the northern ridge and was heading back to his small cabin near the San Pedro River before the storm could break loose. The scent of rain hung heavy in the air, and the distant rumble of thunder echoed off the distant cliffs. Then, just as a bolt of lightning split the sky, Daniel heard something, faint but unmistakable, a cry, not the cry of an animal, but of a human. At first he thought it might have been a trick of the wind, but when he dismounted and listened again, he heard it clearly, a woman's voice, weak and desperate. He followed the sound through the tall grass, pushing aside wet branches and mud until he came upon a small hollow beneath a cluster of rocks. There, half hidden beneath a torn blanket, lay an Apache woman, her face pale as the moonlight that flickered between the clouds. Her dark hair was tangled, her lips cracked, and her hands clutched her swollen belly. She was with child and in pain. Daniel froze. The sight of an Apache woman was enough to make most white men draw their guns in those days. The wars between settlers and native tribes had turned the land into a graveyard of mistrust and revenge. But Daniel wasn't like most men. He saw fear and suffering in her eyes, not the enemy. "Ma'am," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Can you hear me?" Her breathing was shallow, but she managed to whisper a few broken words in English. "Help, please, baby." Without another thought, Daniel lifted her gently and carried her to his horse. He wrapped her in his coat, mounted Dusty, and rode hard through the storm, the rain cutting against his face like shards of glass. Every few minutes he looked down to make sure she was still breathing. "Hold on," he kept saying, though he wasn't sure she could hear. "You're gonna make it." By the time they reached his cabin, lightning had turned the sky white and the river roared like a living thing. He carried her inside, laid her on his bed, and lit the oil lamp. Her skin burned with fever, and Daniel realized she'd been walking for days. Her clothes were torn, her feet bruised, and there was a faint mark of blood on her leg. She'd been shot, a grazing wound that had already begun to fester. He worked quickly, cleaning her wound with whiskey and wrapping it tight. She winced but didn't cry out. Daniel could see she was strong, stronger than most men he'd met. When morning came, the storm had passed, and the desert stretched quiet and golden outside. The woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Where am I?" she whispered. "Safe," Daniel replied simply, handing her a cup of water. "You're safe now." For a long moment she just looked at him, unsure if she could trust him. Then she drank. He asked her name, and after a pause she said, "Nayeli." The name meant "I love you" in her language, though Daniel didn't know it. Over the next few days she began to recover. She spoke little, but Daniel could see the weight she carried in her silence. Sometimes she'd stare out the window toward the mountains as if searching for someone or something she'd lost. Slowly, Daniel pieced together her story. She had fled from a military raid on her tribe's camp near Fort Bowie. Her husband had been killed trying to protect her, and she'd been running ever since, carrying a child that now seemed close to arriving. When she finished, Daniel felt something stir inside him, a mix of sorrow and admiration. He knew the risks of sheltering her. If the army or any settlers found out, they'd brand him a traitor. But looking at her, fragile yet unyielding, he knew he couldn't turn her out. One evening, as the fire crackled, between them she said softly, "Why you help me?" "I am Apache." Daniel stared into the flames, thinking for a long time before answering. "Because, Mom, pain don't care what color a person's skin is, and neither should kindness." That night, as she finally slept peacefully, Daniel sat by the window, keeping watch with his rifle in his lap. Outside, the coyotes sang their mournful song, and somewhere beyond the dark hills, the first light of dawn began to rise over the endless frontier. The following days brought both peace and peril. The storm had washed away most of the tracks leading to the cabin, but Daniel knew it was only a matter of time before someone came looking. The army patrols had been sweeping the territory for runaways, and a lone cowboy living near the river would surely draw questions. Still, he refused to abandon Nayeli. Her time was near, and her body trembled with the effort of carrying life after so much loss. Daniel prepared for the birth as best he could, boiling water, tearing sheets, and pacing the wooden floor like a restless spirit. He'd never delivered a baby before, but he'd seen his mother do it once, long ago, before she died of fever. When Nayeli's pains began, her cries filled the cabin, echoing through the wind. Daniel held her hand, whispering calm words, though fear gripped his heart. Hours passed like centuries. At last, as dawn broke and the first rays of light spilled across the floorboards, the cry of a newborn pierced the stillness. A boy, tiny, alive and strong. Tears filled Nayeli's eyes as she held her child. "He lives," she whispered. "My son lives." Daniel smiled, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. He wrapped the baby in his old red bandana, the only thing of color in the gray morning. "He's a fighter," Daniel said softly, "like his mother." But their peace was short-lived. That afternoon, as Daniel fetched water from the river, he spotted movement on the ridge, 3 riders wearing blue coats. Soldiers. His blood ran cold. He raced back to the cabin. "We have to go," he said, breathless. Nayeli looked up, clutching her child. "Go? Where?" "North," Daniel said. "There's a trading post 2 days' ride from here. If we can reach it, they won't find you." She hesitated, fear clouding her eyes. "They will kill you for helping me." Daniel shook his head. "Better they kill me for doing right than live knowing I didn't." They left under cover of night, Daniel leading the horse through the narrow trails between mesquite trees. The baby slept soundly against his mother's chest. Behind them, the sound of hooves grew closer. Daniel urged the horse faster, his heart pounding with every breath. At the crossing near the canyon, a shot rang out. The soldiers had found them. Bullets whistled past as Daniel turned and fired back, driving them off long enough for Nayeli to escape down the ridge. He took one last look at her, silhouetted by the moonlight, before spurring Dusty forward to draw the soldiers away. Hours later, bloodied but alive, Daniel returned to the spot where he'd left her. She was gone. For a moment, panic gripped him, but then he saw it, a small bundle wrapped in his red bandana, resting safely in the hollow of a tree. Next to it was a stone, carved with a single word in Apache, "Thank you." Years passed. The legend of the cowboy who saved the Apache woman spread quietly across the frontier, carried by travelers and traders who spoke of a child born during a storm, a boy with his mother's dark eyes and a red bandana tied around his tiny wrist. Some said Daniel never stopped watching the hills, waiting for a sign of them. Others said he finally found peace, knowing that somewhere out there a child was alive because he chose compassion over fear. And so, dear viewer, if you ever find yourself lost in the wild places of life, remember this tale. Kindness doesn't belong to a nation or a race. It belongs to the brave hearts who choose it when it's hardest to give. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of courage, humanity, and the untamed spirit of the Wild West. There are many more frontiers to explore, and together we'll ride into every one of them.